Eternals is the latest film in the MCU. And how is it? Well, it has a lot of problems. Now, it's certainly more entertaining as far as pacing goes. It's a lot more entertaining than, say, The Incredible Hulk or Thor the Dark World or even Captain Marvel. But story-wise, there's a lot of issues. And filmmaking-wise, there's a lot of issues. Now, there are going to be some mild spoilers here, so if you don't want to know anything, then probably just click out. But if you've already seen the movie, here you go. So first off, the movie begins with reading. And not just one or two sentences. This isn't like a quote or a couple of lines. When I say reading, I mean like paragraphs of it, just to get all the exposition out of the way. And there's two things I've learned from Cinema Sins is that you should never do when you start your movie. Reading and narration. And this is reading. And it's, 1 or 2 lines bad enough. But paragraphs of reading, that's a lot. And it already makes me feel confused, like I'm already missing something. Now, there are some good elements to the script. From the trailer, I mean, it seemed like they kind of wrote themselves into a corner. Because it's like, well, if you guys are so powerful, then why didn't you help fight Thanos? It's like, well, we were instructed not to interfere. And it's like, well, that's convenient. Like, that's plot convenient. But that's not the full line. It goes really deeper into, we need to allow the humans to learn from their mistakes. We need to allow them to suffer so they can grow and learn from themselves. That's good. That's really good. That's really philosophical. That stuff about it was good. Now, I know everyone was thinking, oh, Chloe Zhao, such a great director now. This is the early film that I've seen, so I can't speak for the other film that she's made, but I honestly was not that impressed with her directing. Mostly because the lighting in this movie, a lot of it was bad. There were some scenes that were too dark to see. I'm just like, okay, what's going on? Who's talking? I can barely see their faces. I can't tell what's going on. It's too dark to see. On top of that, the movie keeps having to clarify where it is because it jumps around a lot. We're in present day. Now we're in Babylonian times. Now we're in World War I. Now we're in the present day again. And we're in this kind of thing. And there's a lot of jumping around. It doesn't tell a very clear, linear story, especially because these are characters we don't know about yet. So it makes it all the more confusing. And on top of that, there are characters that we barely get to know. We get to know these characters maybe 10 minutes out of the whole thing, and then they die, and then they make it seem like it's this big deal. But I felt no emotion when this character died because I didn't get to know the character well enough. And so that's the problem, is like, if they had decided to make Avengers first, if they had decided, let's not do origin stories for all these other characters. Let's do Avengers first. Avengers will be the first movie we make. But we'll give the audience a little bit of clarification. We'll have little sprinkles of flashbacks to give you a little bit of Iron Man's origin. Or sprinkles of flashbacks to give you a little bit of Captain America's origin. And then they keep the movie going, and then they flash forward, and it shows Iron Man dying, and they flash back to the present of the movie, and he's still alive. Like, that wouldn't have been as emotional. It would not have worked, but that's what they do with this movie. And on top of that, there's things that kind of took me out of it. For example, DC apparently now exists in the MCU, because there's a character who is basically just Superman. He flies. He shoots lasers out of his eyes, to the point where, yes, everyone's going to compare him to Superman, which characters in this movie do. And they're like, well, I'm not Superman because I didn't wear a cape. Which means that DC exists in the MCU, which raises a lot of issues, because Josh Brolin, who played Thanos, was Jonah Hex, which is a DC movie. And of course, Ryan Reynolds is Green Lantern. Taika Waititi was Korg in the MCU, so he was a Green Lantern. And I'm sure there are other examples, but that just kind of took me out of it. It makes you think, okay, that's a little weird. And the problem is, the cast is, for the most part, is pretty good. Especially, I cannot pronounce this guy's name, and I'm not going to try because I know I'm going to butcher it. But he's the Bollywood actor, and he was also in Men in Black International as Ponty the Alien, and he was the best part of that movie. And somebody needs to take this guy to a chiropractor, because I'm sure his back is in a lot of pain from carrying this entire movie. Because he's by far the best part of this movie. He's actually charismatic. He's funny. He gets the best parts of this movie. And unfortunately, like, Angelina Jolie, who's probably the biggest star in this movie, she's boring. Angelina Jolie's character in this movie is boring. But I'll say this proves that Syndrome from The Incredibles was right. Because he says, when everybody is super, Nobody is. And that's the problem, is there's like 12 characters in this entire movie, none of which we know anything about. So they have to introduce them to us through flashbacks and whatnot. And so that makes it really hard to care about them. And really, when the most interesting thing about the movie is the mid-credits scene, that's the problem. Not the movie itself, but the mid-credits scene. Now, the action's well shot. I will say that. The action's pretty good. But I didn't care that much about stakes because I didn't get to care into these characters. If you're saying, would you care if there was a sequel to this movie? Would you care if these characters return? I would say, honestly, no. Like, I don't give a care about any of these characters because I don't, even after a movie that's almost 3 hours long, I just don't know that much about them to even care about them at all. Like, I didn't relate to or resonate with any of these characters. But anyway, so if you don't want to know the post-credit scene, click out now. But real quick, my grade for this movie, before I get to the post-credit scene, and why that's a... Normally I would do this, but I have a problem with the post-credit scene as well. So I would say this movie gets a D from me. This gets a D, a 6 out of 10, and a 2 out of 5 stars. Now, as for the mid-credit scene, this was the problem I had with it. They're hyping this character up to be the brother of Thanos. Okay? Thanos, the most terrifying character we've gotten in these movies. Played by Josh Brolin. Guy who's very tall, very muscly, very intimidating. So who do you think we get to play his brother? Harry Styles. And it's not like they used CGI or anything to make Harry Styles look more intimidating. No, it's just Harry Styles in a weird costume. He looks exactly like he does. Like, I'm sorry, but you're not Thanos' brother. You're not intimidating. I laugh at you that you're going to be the next bad guy that we're scared of. So that was the other problem with it. So yeah, I mean, even if you're a diehard MCU fan, just guys, don't waste your time with this one. If you're really curious, there's really not that much to it. It's barely even connected to anything MCU. I forgot this was an MCU movie at points. There were one in times where it's like, well, now that Iron Man and Captain Rogers are gone, who's going to lead the Avengers? I was like, oh yeah, this is somewhat connected to MCU. At least with Shang-Chi, there were little mentions of things that made it feel connected. This does not feel connected at all. It feels like its own thing. And it's just not interesting. It's not an interesting movie. The stakes aren't that high. And just, I don't care about any of these characters. So yeah, I would have to say this movie gets a D, a 2 out of 5 stars, and a 6 out of 10. And that's kind of being generous. The 6 out of 10 is being a little bit generous, but anything below that would be an F. But like I said, there was some cool action, which is why it's not completely an F. But, you know, even if you're a diehard MCU fan, it's not worth the wait to see it in theaters. Just wait for Disney Plus in like 3 months. Don't pay the money to see it. It's really not worth it.